Hi, my name is Dionne McClain-Freeney. I'm a musical director, composer, arranger, choral director, and a pianist specializing in gospel music. This workshop on playing gospel piano looks briefly at styles of playing through gospel music history, as well as some things you can put in your toolkit, like chord substitutions, cadences, changes in feel, and more. Fast BPM of 140 or higher, and you would have like a really driving bass line, like. We'll also analyze some songs I love to play, and I'll share some composers and more songs that inspire my playing. Enjoy. How I got over, how I got over. You know my soul looks back and wonders how I made it over. How I got over came from a mighty, mighty long way. And my soul looks back and wonders how I made it over. Okay, so that's just a little kind of sprinkling of things that you would hear in gospel piano. So, what is gospel piano? What do we mean? First of all, let me get this together here. Oop, figure out how to turn pages. All right. So, gospel music is a vocalist or choir-based sacred music form that blends strong harmonies, rhythmic accompaniment with elements of blues, jazz, and more. And while there are secondary types of gospel, including Southern country and hip hop, gospel music has its roots in a Black sacred music tradition. The name gospel comes from the lyrical inspiration of the New Testament in the Bible, which features the gospel or good news of Jesus Christ. So that's where we get gospel music from. And I probably should have practiced how to turn pages. There we go. Gospel music is not all fast, all loud, without structure or organization. It is not only to be performed by or loved by Black folks or religious people. You do not have to be a Christian to be a practitioner or a lover of gospel music. I thought it was important that I say what gospel music is not. Gospel music is bold. It's attractional, it's emotional, it's intentional. It is meant to be felt and promote feelings. It's oral, it's supposed to be sung, it's supposed to be shared and passed on with or without musical literacy, meaning that you don't have to know how to read music to be able to pass it on because it has an oral tradition. It is also oral. It's meant to be heard, not just read from a page, which takes me to the next thing. Gospel music is performer-driven versus composer-driven, meaning that it's always open to performer interpretation, what the performer is going to put in it, what they feel about it. A performer might have a moan in them when they sing it because that's how they're feeling. As opposed to classical music as an example of a composer-driven style of music. So classical music, it's generally agreed that it's going to be played the same way every time because of how it's written down. So the articulations are there, the expressions are there. So gospel music is performer-driven as opposed to composer-driven. Now, there are exceptions, certainly, within both of those things. But for the most part, gospel music is performer-driven versus composer-driven. So I think gospel music is what God's voice might sound like. Sometimes consonant, sometimes dissonant, bluesy, rhythmic, soothing, engaging, memorable. I think it is what we all look like. We are tall, we are short, we are fat, we are skinny. We are white people and Black people and brown people. We are gay and straight. We are married, we are single, we are all of these things. And I think gospel music, because it blends all of these things, I believe it's what God's voice might sound like. So that's my definition of gospel music. So to give us a little context, I'm going to do a super fast, rough timeline of how we've gotten to where we are now in terms of gospel music. So we have the emergence of the Pentecostal movement out in California, and also the emergence of gospel hymns. These songs are more emotional, they're more dynamic, they shadow sort of the Pentecostal movement. Also, they're much more New Testament based in order to draw souls in. That was what the purpose was. And so that's why they were called gospel hymns. We're going to fast forward and we get to the 20s and we discover Arizona Drains, a Black woman who incorporated ragtime piano styles into sacred music. And she was a darling of the early Pentecostal movement. And I would say that she's probably the mother of gospel piano. So she would probably do something like, let the power of the Holy Ghost fall on me. Let the power of the Holy Ghost fall on me. Let the power of the Holy Ghost fall on me. Let the power of the Holy Ghost fall on me. Hey, send it on down. Something dance. That's what Arizona Drains would do. So that kind of style moved along into the 30s and the 40s. You had the emergence of more gospel song composers like Lucy Campbell, Roberta Martin, Sally Martin, Thomas Dorsey, who you might know as the author of Precious Lord, Take My Hand. Mahalia Jackson famously sang it at MLK's funeral. Aretha Franklin has also done it. He started out as a blues man named Georgia Tom. You also have the emergence of quartets, a misleading term because quartets did not necessarily have four people. It was based on a four-part sound. You had groups like the Dixie Hummingbirds, the Five Blind Boys, the Swan Silvertones. The accompaniment for music during this era is piano. Maybe there's pipe organ, maybe there's guitar. Guitar is generally going to be associated more with Southern, more rural gospel. In the 50s, we now have Sister Rosetta Tharpe, definitely the queen of rock and roll. We also have the emergence of Mahalia Jackson. We have emergence of groups like the Caravans, Professor Alex Bradford and the Bradford Specials. James Cleveland is starting to come onto the scene. And more importantly, we have the introduction of the Hammond organ, a game changer in gospel music. Performances in this era were generally accompanied by piano and Hammond, not drums, for a very simple reason. Drums would make you move. Moving would make you dance. Dancing would make you feel some kind of way, and the next thing you knew, you would be sitting by fornicating. So you wouldn't have any drums until much later on, until the 60s. And so you start to have crossover of gospel artists into jazz, into pop music. So you have acts like Mahalia Jackson and the Ward Sisters performing at jazz festivals around the world. You have now more inclusion of popular music sounds. We're starting to see more amplified instruments. Instrumentation is piano and Hammond, and eventually we're going to add drums. The 70s is when things really change. So I like to think of the California sound. In Southern California, there were choirs like the Thompson Community Singers, and there were young people like the Hawkins family, Walter Hawkins, Edwin Hawkins. They got exposed to rock and roll and the hippie movement and soul music, and they started putting that youthful energy from pop culture into gospel music, and it crossed over and just took off. And so now you have drums, bass, guitar, Hammond, and piano, just like you would maybe in a soul or in a rock and roll band. Choirs started to grow in popularity in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and I've listed some of them there. And also the choir sound became popular too in pop music. There were groups like Foreigner, and I gave you the example here. Foreigner had a hit in the mid 80s called I Want to Know What Love Is. And what really made that song was the inclusion of the New Jersey Mass Choir. Production at this point too started sounding less like it was recorded in somebody's basement or in somebody's church basement, and it started to have a really much more polished sound. In the 80s, you also had synthesizers and synth pianos come out. You had the DX7 come out. You had the M1 piano come out, and so there was a very particular kind of bell-like piano sound that you started to hear on things. And you had the emergence of one of my favorite gospel composers of all time, Richard Smallwood. We're going to come back to him. So we move forward now to the 90s, and we have a choir director from the Dallas-Fort Worth area named Kirk Franklin, who comes out from behind the DFW Mass Choir, and he starts his own solo career. And his music is really based on hip hop and R&B. It's really much more loop focused. It's really much more sample focused. For example, a song like Stomp basically has this bass line going all the way through it from the beginning to the end. Lately, I've been going through some things that's really got me down. Right? That doesn't doesn't sound like church music per se, right? But it sounds like R&B. It sounds like hip hop, and his popularity grew from that. So you had more studio production, you have more electronic instruments. You also have smaller and smaller ensembles. Maybe not so many choirs, but certainly duos and trios and small choirs of like a dozen people or less are starting to come up. So from the late 90s to the present. So for me, the biggest moment in the mid 90s was when Richard Smallwood moves from his very successful small ensemble to a choir, and he releases this song that is just iconic. And so churchy folks who are here, y'all know what that is. So this is a song called Total Praise. And it has some really beautiful classical music elements in it. And we're going to talk more about that song in a few minutes. Also, what happened was that now sheet music was really starting to become much more available. There was no more, you got a cassette like I was when I was 17 and started playing for my church's gospel choir, and you got a tape at the beginning of the month, and you had to sit with the tape and you had to write out a rhythm chart for yourself and do transcriptions like that. Now you could actually buy the music to be able to read it. But you've also got church musicians who are increasingly getting more formal training. And part of that formal training, they're going off to Juilliard, they're going off to Berkeley, and they're studying jazz, and they're bringing those jazz harmonies back to the church. And we're going to look at something later on that's going to show a little bit of that too. So that's kind of the late 90s to the present. And so you've got a lot of solo artists and small groups whose music sounds almost indistinguishable from R&B or pop. If you took the vocals out and you just listened to the tracks, you would probably swear you were listening to like a top 50 or a top 100. So that is our rough timeline to give us some context. Okay, so what now? Let's play. Right, so we're going to take a look at a hymn. So I got this from a site called hymnary.org. We're going to look at a pretty popular Protestant hymn called Leaning on the Everlasting Arms, and we're actually going to look at the refrain. So this is our refrain. I'm going to play it as is so you can hear it. Decent enough, it's moving, right? There's some things that we can do, right? So I'm gonna pop out the refrain again. We're gonna put some chords on. So let's play the chords now, and we're gonna beef them up. If you're sitting at your keyboard and you wanna play along with me, that would be great. So we're gonna play the chords, beef it out a little bit. So I've added some bass. More that we can do. So we're going to start adding things on now. So some of this is going to be pretty obvious. Some of this maybe you didn't think about. So we're going to blues this up a little bit. We're going to put a little funk on it. So we're going to put some sevenths in, right? So here we go. So here's our seventh. Another seventh. So now we're going
gonna do some substitutions for fun. So we're gonna keep our chords, we're gonna keep our sevenths. If you look down to the second system, to beat 3, we're gonna substitute that A flat for an F minor. So from the top, it would sound like this. And I'm gonna walk down, and I'm gonna turn this chord, this A flat here, in bar 4 to a B flat 9. I know they're singing an A flat. That's okay. The melody is in the C. And then we're adding E flat 7. We're gonna keep going. So let's augment that. Add a little interest. Let's augment that. And then let us make this a diminished chord. So we're using the passings we're putting some substitutions in our passings. And we're gonna drop in a 2-5-1, very prominent in pop music. I know some of you already know this. All right, so substitutions, 7ths. Play the chords to beef up the accompaniment. Now, walking bass. I'm gonna say something that's gonna go a little counter to something that Georgia said a couple of weeks ago. If you have a bass player, try not to play their parts. I am an old school gospel piano player, which means that I have a heavy left hand and I enjoy playing a bass line. Ideally, if the bass player and I are working with each other, we're gonna play around each other, not necessarily play the same things. So yes, and. All right, so let's add a little bit of walking bass. So it would sound like this, and I'm going to push the tempo just a little bit. Sorry about that. That was awful. Yes, add a walking bass. So there are some things that you can do, and we're not there yet. I'm going to stop sharing for a second to see if there are any questions. See if there are any questions. Yes, drums equals fornication. That's exactly it. All right, so those are some things that you can do. One of the other things, and I did not score this out, but if you put a 12/8 feel to a 4/4 tune, it gives you something completely different. So I'm going to stick to the refrain that we were just playing, and I'm going to give us a 12/8 feel like this. So, and there's something about that too. Remember, I was saying that gospel music it is meant to elicit feelings. So there's something about a 12/8 feel. You know that something is coming. You know that something is coming, and even different from 4/4, like you know that you have time in between to react to the next thing that's coming. If you were in church, for example, you'd be lining up, and everybody's getting on to right. Right, so a 12/8 feel is always a nice thing to do. Okay, so let's look at how we're doing. We are not bad. Okay, good. Let's look at total praise. I'm gonna play a little bit of it, not looking at the music, I'm gonna play a little bit of it without looking at the music. I'm gonna interpret this in the moment. But you can follow along with me in the music. Is telling you something is about to happen. That right there is telling you that something is about to happen. So there are also cadences within the music that are setting you up. Something big is happening. So the song starts out really quietly here. So there's a drama that's building. And you do a little flourish. Mine eyes to the hills. Drama, drama, drama. Knowing my help. And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger as we go on. Is coming from you. Flourish. Your peace you give me in time of the storm. In time of the storm. So the lyrics are also driving what's happening in the music. So as you play, right, think about what's happening in the lyrics and what you're going to do in relation to what's happening in the lyrics as well, right? Which is not that different from musical theater. In fact, the worship service has its origins in theater. We don't want to admit it in the church because we think it's going to turn people off from God, but that's really the thing. Obviously, that's why you've got smells and bells. Obviously, that's why you've got elaborate robes and headpieces and all kinds of things. If that ain't theater, I don't know what is, right? So here we are. This is the apex of the song. This is the apex of the song. You are, and I can't sing it up there, but it would sound like this. You are the source of my strength. You are the source of my strength. You are the strength of my life. I lift my hands in total. Right, so drama, 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 apex, 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 and then it comes back down, right? I have goosebumps from thinking about like just playing this. But there's, right, so the thing about the piano and the thing about being an accompanist, right, is that you have to go along, accompany. You have to tailor what you're playing to what's happening in the music. So let the lyrics drive you, certainly let the emotion in it drive you, and tailor what you play that way, right? Okay, so let's take a look at, let's see if I can go back to, all right, so this is this section where I just stopped. This is the section where I just stopped, right? I played a lot more than what's on the page, but I'll try to play what's on the page. You are the source of my strength. Listen to that. Listen to that. Right? There's emotion in that. There's drama in that. And it takes us to, you are the strength of my life. And a nice minor 7 flat 5. That's another thing to put in your toolkit as you're arranging, as you think about playing minor 7 flat 5 chords. Love them. I lift my hands in, and then he has a whole bunch of tritones in these chords here. Total praise to you. And if you look at this last bar, it's piano, but then it's gonna ramp right back up. Right? And we are back to you are. So let's look at some substitutions. So last measure of that first system, I'm gonna go back to the D flat over A flat. You are the source of my strength. I'm gonna substitute this E flat minor with a C minor 7 to take us to the F7 sharp 5 sharp 9, which is the chord that's on beat 4. So let me do that again. You are the source of my strength. Right? And then we're on to the B flat minor 7. So you can do some inner voicing things too. You are the strength. Let me stop sharing for a second so you can see my hands. Right, so we have our E flat minor 7, flat 5. Like if I were playing that as a solo, that would be a thing that I could do, right? Just ride that chord out. Right, so I could do that. So we have a 2-5-1 coming up. So that's our 2 altered. So we're taking our 5 and we're going to make it a minor chord, a minor 7th chord, because we're moving. And so now we have a 1-7. We're on our way to the 4. And then we have these gorgeous tritones here. That's 1. And you know, they call tritones devil's intervals or satanic intervals. So in a piece that is just so amazing and so sacred, he has put in not just 1, but 3 tritones, 3 sets of tritones. Right? So there's our 3rd tritone. Okay, so that's Total Praise. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Bridger Smallwood. Yes. So let me check and see if there are any questions. Okay, cool. All right, let us look at another piece of music. So I said that one of the things that has also happened is the influence of jazz and jazz harmonies on gospel. And so I'm going to share a piece of music. We're going to have some fun with this one. All right. Okay. So simple. This is the voice part. I've taken the accompaniment out because I just want you to hear how this sounds as is. Right? A lot of A flats, a lot of A flats. If I were going to make up an accompaniment, I might do something like this. Right? Very simple. A lot of 1, 4, 1, 5 kind of thing. Right? So you think. I'm going to play the accompaniment that goes with this song. That's the accompaniment that goes with this. I know, right? That's crazy. Crazy. Okay, so I gave you the music for this, so let's look at this. This is a song called Awesome God. It's written by Sean Brown. Sean Brown is part of a group called Youthful Praise. When this came out, it was bananas. In my PowerPoint presentation, I gave you a bunch of YouTube clips that you should listen to. This is for sure one of them. So let's take a look at this. First of all, it has really no introduction. It's this. And then it goes right into the chord. God is C diminished over F with still an A flat triad in the voice. So we have some major against minor happening, some crunch there. I'm going to go back. So we have another sharp 5, sharp 9. This is our first chord underneath this A flat triad. Remember, this is what's happening in the voice. This is what's happening in the voice. Do you expect this in the accompaniment? No, probably not, but it's amazing. And we have a diminished chord. We have an A against a held A flat. Right? And then this whole pattern here, which is crazy. you put it all together, it's like this. He is an awesome God and greatly to be praised. So we have again an A-flat triad and an A-flat 13 chord in the accompaniment. And we're back to that 12/8 thing that I talked about before. So you feel there's something that's happening. There's something that's happening. And so we're back to the feeling in it, right? So going to, right? So drama, all this stuff happening with 13ths and sharp 5s and sharp 9s, diminished chords, all of this stuff, that's straight out of jazz and imported right into gospel with traditional gospel triads, parallel harmony. That's parallel harmony. Parallel harmony is harmony that's just going to move all together at the same time. You don't have like, right, like that, any other voices moving. Right, so that is, so that's jazz into gospel. And so again, the level of training now has become much more sophisticated, and it's now starting to, the music, you can hear it in the music, you can hear it in the music. This is a great piece, a lot of fun to play. I'm going to play a little more of it. I'm not going to sing. I'm going to spare you all. I love that. Just with a God is just G in the melody. God is great. We've gone out of the key now. We don't have this A flat. You would think the A flat would be included. You would think it would be that, but it's not. It's not. It's right. That's jazz right there. And then we're back to this first figure. And the drums would fill in there, and everybody's back on. And then it goes back to traditional churchy on the vamp. Now, this is a question I get a lot. Why is so much repeated in gospel music? So here's why. In a vamp in gospel, think of it this way. You learn something, maybe you get it the first time. Maybe you don't. Maybe you need to get it the second time. Maybe you don't get it the second time. Maybe you get it the third time. So here, right, you've got a song about how great God is. Maybe you don't get that the first time. Maybe you get it the second time. So you've got this vamp here. The tenors are singing, from the rising of the sun until the setting of the same. And then different parts are coming in. My God is worthy to be praised. God is worthy to be praised. And we're going to repeat it. Right? So that is the purpose of the vamp. But this is a super fun song to play. I didn't get it right the first time that I read it. Have some fun with it. Okay, in measure 4, you did this little swing thing in the rhythm of the 16th, but others were straight. Any rules about that, or just listen? So I would say listen. And that's really the thing, that's probably the biggest thing about gospel music being really performer driven versus composer driven. If you hear something, if you hear something, go with what you're hearing. If your soloist appears to need a little help, fill in between what they're singing. You can change the rhythm. You can play with the rhythms for sure. Absolutely. Let me see. Are there particular keys that are common for gospel songs? Kathy. So I'm going to go back to a thing that I heard in the 80s. I don't know how true it is. I think it probably still holds true. So because gospel music was so piano driven, and piano players were really in charge, we liked to hear particular keys. So we liked keys like E flats and B flat and A flat and F because we liked the way that they sounded. They sounded bright. We thought that B wasn't as bright. We thought E wasn't as bright. We thought A wasn't as bright. Oddly enough, these all happen to be guitar keys. When did it change that you started to hear more songs that were in guitar keys? When you had more guitarists who were starting to make gospel music. If you listen to contemporary Christian stuff that's much more rock driven and much more guitar driven, therefore you're absolutely going to hear more guitar friendly keys like E, A, and B. Israel Houghton, yes, was a big one. Dionne, you have other questions waiting in the queue. Cool. All right, so let's start taking some questions. I'm ready.
Awesome. So I just wanted to make sure that the people who asked the way we normally do things didn't have their questions get skipped. So one of the questions you have is, if you were to give us 3 gospel pianists to study, who would they be?
In no particular order. Mildred Falls. Mildred Falls was Mahalia Jackson's accompanist for many, many years. She had a really simple but effective way of playing behind her. So she would do things that were kind of similar to Arizona Drains. So I would add Arizona Drains, Dranes, to that list also. So she would do something like, come on children, let's sing. Come on children, let's shout. Come on children, let's sing about the goodness of the Lord. So she would fill in between the phrases. So come on children, let's sing. Come on children, let's shout. Which is a thing you can do. So Mildred Falls, Arizona Drains, and Richard Smallwood. Richard is also a pianist, right? So it's not just that he writes these amazing, beautiful songs, but he also is a pianist, and a really beautiful pianist to listen to and also to watch. So those are my 3 top recs.
Awesome. And what kind of voicings do you use in the right hand for some of the fills that you do?
Oh dear, I knew this was going to come up. So I am a hybrid player. I like to occasionally jump from chords to a bass line in the left hand, and then fat chords with occasional melody lines in the right hand. So I like to combine those two things. It depends on the style of song that I'm playing. Like a ballad is going to call for different things, or if there are songs that have spaces in them and you want to fill those things in, fill those spaces. I feel like I'm not fully answering this question. I think I'm going to have to play more than I'm going to be able to explain it. So if I were playing on a song like this called God Is Here, for example, there is a sweet anointing. So I'm playing chords in the left hand as opposed to bass line. Anointing in the sanctuary. So little arpeggiation there. I switched over from just playing chords to a bass line, and I'm going to switch back to playing a bass line. There is a stillness in the atmosphere. Back to hybrid of bass line, chords, melodic thing. So it depends, and that's why you really have to listen. That's why this music has such a listening element to it. That's why I say it's oral tradition as well.
This just came in, but I'm going to share it because it's related. Because somebody asked if you have favorites for us to listen to in terms of gospel vocal arranging.
Smallwood, Thompson community singers. Smallwood because the harmonies are just gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. The Thompson community singers and Ricky Dillard, they are, those are choirs. And so they're, yeah. There are small ensembles like God's Property is one of Kirk Franklin's many groups. He had The Family, and then he had God's Property. Those are two smaller ensembles. There's a group called The Walls Family. That's an example of a smaller ensemble that still has a really choral sound. One of the purest choirs that I heard recently does an arrangement of What a Friend We Have in Jesus. The group is called the Aeolians. If I can reach my, the Aeolians. And I included a clip in there. They do, that also I think is a masterpiece in how you accompany based on what is being sung, based on what you hear happening. The piano is just enough to keep it moving, but also does not get in the way of the singing. So a lot of that piece is in unison. What a friend we have in Jesus. Right? Nothing is singing. There's no singing there, and you've got a little phrase. All our sins and griefs to bear. And we're going to go to a minor 7, flat 5. We've heard that before. What a privilege it is to get a diminished chord. Carry that's it. So that's a little bit from the Take Us to the Lord in Prayer. So the Aeolians for vocal arrangement and accompaniments. That is just amazing. Yeah.
Great. Next question. For people from a more classical background who are stronger readers than improvisers, do you have suggestions for building improvisational substitution and expansion skills?
Yes. The first thing I would say is go buy some music. Go buy some gospel music. There's a lot out there that will have many of the things that are recorded written down. And so you can feel free to borrow those phrases. Feel free to borrow those cadences. Feel free to borrow those inner voicing things. So you think of it this way. As music makers, we have 12 notes. 12 notes to work with. They are colors on a palette. You can combine colors on your palette to make more colors. That's what you're doing. So buy some sheet music and read what they're doing. Study what they're doing. Look at the things that they do. So, memorize that way, right? And put those things in your pocket. Music notes, sheet music plus, sheet music direct. In order of preference for who I think has some of the best music published and then also transcribed. So music notes, sheet music plus, sheet music direct, and then the big winner is N time music, the letter N, time music, and this is actually in my PowerPoint. They are great because they also will do transcriptions, and their transcriptions are actually really, really good. Do I have music that I have written? Yes, I have written music. I have written things for solos and duets, and I also have choral stuff too.
We actually have a combo question that includes that I was going to ask, that says, how did you get into gospel music playing? Have you written any gospel music yourself? And can you play us something?
Yes. Okay. So I grew up in the United Methodist Church. Not the Baptist Church, believe it or not. The United Methodist Church has an incredible hymn singing tradition. The Wesley brothers, Charles Wesley, John Wesley, were incredible hymn writers. Also, Fanny Crosby, for you Maestra, you must know who Fanny with a Y Crosby is. You've got to learn who she is. Hymn singing. So I had 7 choirs in my church. Many of them were because we had about 300 kids walking around, and you wanted to keep them out of trouble, put them in the choir. We also had 2 worship services every Sunday. So the children would sing at the first worship, and then the chancel choir, which were the adults, would sing all the classical stuff. Then we also had a men's choir, women's choir, gospel choir. You couldn't get into the gospel choir until you were 17. So I did not learn how to play gospel until I was 17. And the way that I learned was when the director remembered that I played piano, she would hand me a cassette tape and say, this is what we're working on this month. And so I learned gospel music that way, sit down and play it. And so I would play what I heard. Which was a huge, huge, huge skill to develop. And I'm always surprised that people who are super trained can't play by ear. I'm always kind of surprised at that. So things that I've written, little piece of something. Where I'm gonna jump to the vamp. No one does the things you do. No one loves me the way you do. Nobody else is as great as you. Nobody else. And remember, I said a vamp, it's a lesson, right? So in a vamp, we have nobody else. Nobody else. Nobody else. Nobody else. There is none like you. Nobody else. There is none like you. Nobody else. There is none like you. I've certainly done this outside of church, is you get excited by this, right? It's all feeling again, right? So this is what happens in the band. Nobody else, nobody else, nobody else, nobody else. You know, so that's right. So there's that's a little bit of something. Okay, let me see. What else? What other questions?
I'm going to jump on. Wait, let me jump on and say it's 2:00, and I have to do the thing where I say, if you need to leave at 2:00, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of this. I hope that you'll join us again. I feel like I'm the police shutting down the best party in the world. So I'm here as long as you are, Dionne. Thank you.
I will be here. I'm also going to put my email address in the chat, or if somebody can drop that in, that's great. Right.
And I'll also take this time to say, in case people are leaving now, because it's 2, that you can save the chat. There's been all the questions that were answered with like websites and resources. To save the chat, right down next to where you write the 2, there's those 3 little dots in a box. If you click them, you can hit save chat, and then you can save the chat. So the next question is, if we have a hymnal and we want to put gospel style onto the basic chord progressions, what would be the first few basic substitutions we should try?
First few basic substitutions. Sevenths, find where you can do a 6-2-5-1 thing. Those are the first 2 substitutions. I would also say make it beefy. Make it beefy. Don't be afraid of a good fat chord.
Great. And then for people who always play very much on the front side of the beat and push forward, do you have tips for staying laid back enough to lock into the gospel pocket?
So the thing is that you can't push forward if you don't know where the pocket is to begin with. So you've got to, so if you're playing, you have 2 hands. So one hand is gonna have to be the foundation, right? One hand is gonna have to be the foundation, and right. So that's what you do. You gotta make it happen. You have 2 hands. One hand is one hand is the one that's gonna be party in the front. The other hand is gonna be business in the back. That's just what you have to do.
Great. And the next question is, we had somebody ask, Elvis had the Blackwood Brothers Gospel Quartet sing backup, right?
Yes. There was also a group called the Jordanaires. Another quartet sound, again, not necessarily 4 people. It was just based on a four voice sound.
And where would you say the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir falls in the genre?
They certainly have a really wide presence, I think, because they have so many people. That choir is huge that they create a really giant sound. Plus, they've got some really good arrangers in their back pocket. I will kind of be a little bit gossipy though about them, just a little bit. So they do an arrangement of Total Praise, and this is only because I can back this up. So they do an arrangement of Total Praise. There's a little section in the beginning, and they do this, hills, in the tenor part. Right? So, Lord, I will lift my hands to the hills. Now, Richard Smallwood is on YouTube. There's a clip of him where he talks about that very thing. He said, a lot of people like to do that. I did not write it. Don't do it. So, that's just a little bit of gossipy humor, but it is absolutely true. You can totally find that. It's called Richard Smallwood Masterclass, and he just spells that. But Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir, I think, has done great things. They're really lovely to listen to.
Awesome. We had a request for if you can demonstrate a few grooves that show the hands divided. A few more
hands
of those.
divided. Great. So let's take an old school song like How I Got Over. How I got over. How I got over. You know that my soul looks back and wonders how I made it over. There's a clip of Joshua Nelson just nailing this piano part. And his claim to fame, aside from being Black and Jewish, Black Jews do exist, is that he sounds almost identical to Mahalia Jackson. And so remember I said one hand is business in the back, party in the front. This is one of those things. So I hope that was, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, and then we had 2 requests for if you have recommendations for books and texts for gospel theory or compilations to get started, transcriptions, etc.
They do exist. I could not tell you anything about their titles, but I have seen them come up, gospel theory books. I would say, again, just buy some sheet music. In my PowerPoint thing, I gave you some places where you can get the sheet music and practice what you see. If you want a variety of compilations, some of these might be out of print, but you can try to find them. There were collections that came out until like the early 2000s or so called Wow Gospel. And so there was a CD, and there also was a book that went with it. And so teach yourself. Listen to the CD, play along with the song. If you can't find, and I mentioned the Wow Gospel because it's a collection, so it's going to have a wide range of things. But actual theory books, I don't know. I would say just find something that you really like, buy it, and start playing like that.
Great. We have 2 questions left, and they're both easy. One is, what is the fast section that often follows the song proper called? And are there like rules or customs for that?
The fast section, you mean the shout?
I am not sure.
I'm gonna guess it's shout. So in a charismatic worship experience, there is a moment where you potentially experience the visitation of the Spirit of God. And what it does is it quickens the spirit and tends to quicken your feet as well. And so it's going to quicken the music. And so you would typically have a really, really fast BPM of 140 or higher. And you would have like a really driving bass line, like, so that would be the shout section. I'm guessing, and shout comes from the ring shout. So slaves would go out into the fields and they would have their worship service and they would walk in a circle, and the walking in the circle and praying and singing would create a feeling of ecstasy, and they would often shout, "Hey!" Right, with the feeling of it. And so that's where shout would come in. Again, it would get faster and faster, and so I think it's shout. That's my guess.
Great. And then the last question that we have is there a place that we can go, or are you able to send examples of you playing that we can try to learn from or play along with? Do you have a YouTube channel?
I should. I don't. There are. If you go to, so I am one of the directors of music at Middle Collegiate Church, and so there are a bunch of things of me playing. There's actually a recent one of me doing something very different, like you wouldn't expect. I'm playing "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing," and it may not be considered gospel, but that's probably the most recent thing I've done. And there's a bunch of clips of me playing. I play for the gospel choir. I'm findable. I should be. My wife would kill me. I should have a YouTube channel, like a proper kind of thing. I don't. She's right. Yeah.
Well, we'll just have to get you set up with one.
Yes.
All right,
Dionne,
that's it for our
thank you.
questions.
Thank you. Are there online services every Sunday at your church?
Yes. So we've been streaming live every Sunday at 11:45, middlechurch.org.
All right. You're going to have a bunch of new viewers this Sunday, I'm sure. A bunch of Maestra people being like, hi. Thank you. Thank you so much for this fabulous presentation. You were so prepared and shared so much of your music and your knowledge, and we are just soaking it up. Thank you for being here. And I hope I see the rest of you Thursday and in the weeks ahead at the Maestra workshops. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.